also some of her other experiences, and she's going to share, and I'm going to let her do it. Go ahead, Kristy.
Thank you. I do have a really loud mouth, so can you guys hear me back there? Great. I was losing my voice this morning, so this was divine intervention that I got my voice back. And tea. So if everybody can silence their phones, that's the first thing that would be awesome, because I know a lot of people will give you dirty looks when your phone goes off, especially when we do a meditation, because we are, even this big group, we're going to do a fun meditation at the end to see if maybe you have had a past life. So what I'm going to talk about today is my story, along with past lives and what the difference between souls and spirits are. And this is a fun lecture. I've done this about 15 times in the last 15 days. So, and this is my last one. So it's sort of like the last concert that people have. I'm kind of giddy, I'm kind of slap happy, and I'm super geeked to be here. So thank you so much. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. When I was 3 years old, I had a spirit that came through and said, your grandmother is going to die and you need to tell your mom. So if you have kids, you know that there's no filter on the little kids. So I went up to my mom and I said, Grandma's going to die. That went over well, right? So I got my first and only spanking. And after that, I realized that what I was seeing, feeling, hearing, knowing, that it was not accepted in my household. My parents were very religious. They had been raised in a Missouri Synod Lutheran church, and what I was seeing, feeling, knowing, hearing was scaring them. So when my grandmother unexpectedly passed away a couple months after my prediction, it frightened them so much that they marched me up to the local Lutheran school and said, get her some Christianity, get this really overly creative child some busy work, and make it go away. Now I tell the story a little bit differently with my kids. I always say that I tested out as a genius. By that time, I was 4. They haven't been to any of my lectures, so they still believe that, so that's okay. So my kindergarten class, unfortunately, was extremely active with spirits. My kindergarten teacher had just lost her father that summer of, and so he could tell that I could see him. And we all have the sixth sense. Every single one of us does. I don't believe I have a superpower at all, except when I'm talking to my husband and I know what he's thinking. I flap my cape in the wind, that's all. So he could tell that I could see him. And I sort of show that as like that blue light special of Kmart, like my light was like flashing, and they were coming towards me and saying, hey, you can see me, and I need you to give this message. So at the age of 4, my teacher, my kindergarten teacher, did not have a very nice father, and he had done some terrible, horrible things to her. And so at the age of 4, he's dictating all of these things that he had done to her, and I have no understanding of all of that. And so I was pretty much going, go away, go away, go away, and I spent a lot of time in the corner. My teacher was frustrated, my mom and dad were frustrated, and the only person that really believed in me was my grandfather. And my grandfather was my mom's dad, and he had just lost his wife. But everything I was seeing, feeling, hearing, knowing, he never questioned me. And he never, made me feel bad, where I was being felt bad by my siblings and by my parents and these so-called imaginary friends that I had that weren't so imaginary because they looked real to me, were frustrating them because they didn't understand. He never once questioned me. He just loved me for who I was. We all have someone like that in our life, or had someone like that in our life, I hope. And so when I was 8 years old, this was 1979, don't do the math. When I was 8 years old, my grandfather was found beaten near death next to his bed. And he was a large man. He was like 6'4", he had bright red hair. He was a farm boy. He came from Scotland. I mean, so it took a lot for somebody to do something to him, right? And he was rushed to ICU. At that time, you had to be 16 years old to go to ICU and visit your loved ones. Well, he kept asking for me. Now, he had a dozen grandkids, and I was the youngest of, and he never played favorites. He always treated us all equal, loved us all the same. He was special to all of us. And I begged my parents to let me go see him because they kept coming home and saying, he keeps asking for you. And of course, you want to know why. Why is he asking for me? Even at the age of, 8, I still wanted to know. And so I tried really, really hard to get that message, but unfortunately, I did not get that message. He passed away. It was at his funeral that I do not remember the whole funeral home thing, but I remember the cemetery like it was yesterday. And he was standing about 100 yards away from where his casket was being lowered into the ground next to my grandma, smoking a cigarette and just smiling. And I always cry during this. And I tell this a zillion times. And I ran over there and I gave him a hug, and he felt flesh and blood. He really did. And he said, Kristy, I have to tell you some things. One, I will always be there for you. I will always protect you. You have to be there for your mom. She had lost her mom, she had lost her dad, and she had lost her brothers. And she was pretty much a 40-year-old orphan. And I don't care if you've lost somebody at 12 or 50, you still feel that pain and that hurt of losing your family. And I need you to know that I know exactly what you're going through because I am one too. He was a medium. And he didn't know how to talk about it either. And it's kind of funny, as I've done these, my cousins have come, I've received different messages, and all of them have had different instances where it made sense. They also had experiences as children. It's funny because back then we didn't talk about it. Now, obviously, I have a room full, and probably you've all had an experience or want an experience, and that's why you're here. But, in the 70s, this would not be that. We thought of Ms. Cleo and the Psychic Friend Network and, all of those kind of, flowing gown, incense burning, crystals hanging out of your neck. And it's really changed. The other thing that I was really bothering my family of since I was young, since I knew my name, they would say, Kristy, do this, or Kristy, do that. And I would always say, my name is Sarah. My name's not Kristy. And it's spelled S-A-R-A. That's my name. And they said, if you want to change your name when you're 16 years old to Sarah, we will do that. Well, that would go over real well, too, right? So I kept that part of me hidden. And even though my mom knew that that was what I felt like my soul name was, this will make sense in a little bit. I felt like that was my soul name. She kept saying, that wasn't even a name on our radar. Kristy was always going to be the name. You were named after a book, Kristy. And if you were a boy, you were going to be Kevin. Sarah was not in it at all. Wasn't I cute back then? So 1978, this was 1979. My mom wrote it wrong. My grandpa had just passed away, and the form of therapy for my mom was shopping. So it was cheaper than a therapist and more fun, too. So, sorry, my therapists out there. So my dad took my mom and I to Tell 12 Mile and Telegraph, and her favorite store was Winkleman's. And remember, I still miss Winkleman's and Crowley's. So they gave me a book. I was a bookworm back then, read everything like I would, drink water. And they sat me in front of a fountain and said, we'll come back and get you. We're going shopping. Crowley's was to my right. Winkleman's was in front of me. The exit was to my left. And a man came up to me soon after my mom and dad took off to go shopping. And he said, little girl, you have really pretty long hair. He had a camera around his neck, and he says, I have a couple more pictures to take. I'm going to go get that developed. And he said, can I take a picture of you? And I said, sure. And he took a photo, and he said, the lighting's not quite right. Can I take another photo? Can you stand up? And I stood up, and he took another photo. And he said, the lighting's still not right. And he grabbed my elbow and started to drag me towards the exit. And as he started to drag me towards the exit, I felt my grandfather in back of me. You know how you can close your eyes and just know when someone you love or is there? And I could sense him. I couldn't see him. I could sense him, his energy. I could smell the cigarette smoke. I just knew that he was there. And then he said, Kristy, run. And I did. That was 1979. They believe that my grandfather saved me from the Oakland County killer. And I believe that too. So after that attempted kidnapping happened, I cut all my hair off. Well, I had it cut off. It was actually really sad because the day that I got all, that's my brother. I got all my hair cut off, went to the out to eat, and the hostess said, "Oh, little boy, do you need a children's menu?" I got my ears pierced right after. So I moved on from Bobsy Twin and Nancy Drew to Ann Rule and Anything True Crime. I knew that I was experiencing what I was experiencing. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And because of that attempted kidnapping, I would take those books and I used them as a tool for myself. I would sit down and I would write out everything that I felt. Was the person stabbed? Do I feel stabbed? Was the person shot? Was it a male that was with them, a female? What did they look like? And I would keep all of these very intricate notes in a journal connected to like Jack the Ripper, and it was a really, really fun reads for a 9-year-old. So, that's what I was, allowing myself to do. When I was 13 years old, it gets crazier. When I was 13 years old, a very unexpected guide came forward, and he said his name was Edgar Allan Poe. And he said that he was going to assist me in not only my life journey, but I was to tell his true story. Now, I was not a Poe fan. Still not. There was no connection that I really had with him, and I didn't understand why he was a guide. I understood that we had guides. My grandpa was a guide, right? He helped me. I had had experiences since I was little, seeing this Native American man in my room, and he didn't scare me. I knew that he was around me. So I was having all of these different experiences, and so when Poe showed up, I kind of said, can I do something like you do in sports and go for a trade? Because I was acing English, but math I wasn't doing so well at. And he pretty much said, does it make you feel any better that I got kicked out of West Point because I wasn't good at math? No, that doesn't make me feel any better. A couple of years ago, he said, the past is like a pebble in my shoe. Now that can be this past and also past life. So karma. We all say karma's what comes around goes around. Wayne Dyer says how people treat you is their karma and how you react is yours. And a lot of times we don't realize that because when somebody does something bad to us or we have that horrible experience, we tend to react negatively, right? We don't do the whole I forgive you thing, not normally. If you are, you're doing a good job. So the karma thing blends into past lives. Now when I went K through 12 Lutheran school. I still am Lutheran. I did the same thing to my kids. I sent them to Lutheran school. And what I ended up doing was I married my high school sweetheart, went to college, did the normal thing, had 2 wonderful kids, divorced the high school sweetheart because don't cheat on a psychic. And don't cheat on anybody, and as I was going through this divorce, which all divorces are horrible, right? Most, I'd say 99.9% of them, I was actually, the visions were coming through even more. I was getting his family that was mad, that had passed away, that was mad at us for divorcing, and I pretty much was saying, haunt him. And, I was getting my guides that were upset and they were worried. So what I did was I went to my minister and said, make it go away. And as I did this whole big confessional with my minister, who was a very conservative 70-ish man who had baptized my children, who had married my high school sweetheart and I, that a son of his that nobody in the parish knew existed, who had had a very tragic passing when he was younger, came through in spirit and said, please tell my dad to not blame himself. He had drowned. And so I brought his son through, and he looked at me. He's like, nobody would know that. Nobody would know that. Nobody knows that but my wife and I. Nobody, we don't talk about that. And he said, this is a gift. We don't talk about this in church because really I'm being taught that all of this is satanic and it's evil and it's horrible and it's coming from the devil. And So we don't talk about that, but this is a gift. Just like if someone's really good at math and they become an accountant, that's what they should do. If someone's really good at dancing, they should pursue something in that. So he handed me a card of a medium and said, get a reading. And I was stunned. So before I made my appointment, I went and I took advantage of my Blue Cross, and I went to a neurologist, University of Michigan, and said, I must have a brain tumor. There's got to be an explanation for this, right? I don't know why I was wishing for a brain tumor, but I felt cursed. I really did. So they ran all these crazy tests, EEGs, EKGs, MRIs, CAT scans, like thousands of dollars. And I get a call at work, and the neurologist said, I'd really like you to come meet me in my office. I'm like, oh no, I do have a brain tumor. I do have something. And in the meantime, I'm not telling anybody about this because I'm scared. When I was 3, I had that spanking. What's an adult gonna do to me? I was working for a school district in human resources, which actually came in really handy with being psychic because I knew who to hire and who to fire. So that wasn't a bad thing at all. But I met with a neurologist, and he sat across from me at his big shiny desk, and he said, you don't have anything wrong with you. You're a medium. And he handed me a book on astral travel and remote viewing. So somehow, some way, whether it's my grandfather or my guides, they put me in the right hands of the right people at the right time. So I made an appointment with a medium, and as I was going through this divorce, and I'm going through this, I'm cursed feeling, which is really an ungrateful thing, but that's how I felt. And I go and I have this, and he closes his eyes, and I parked a block away, by the way. Didn't want anyone to see me. And he closed his eyes, and he snapped them open, and he said, Kristy, you see dead people. And I'm like, I do? And he's like, do you want a job? Maybe. So I accepted a job doing readings there after my 9 to 5 at work. He also said, you're going to meet somebody very soon. He's about 10 years older. He's got 2 kids. He's been divorced for a long time. You're going to get married really quickly, and his name starts with an R. And I went, now I know you're a fraud, because there is no way I am going to end up with anybody. I was just happy being that single lady and being that single mom and taking care of my kids. So when I got hooked up on a blind date with a guy named Chuck, I thought I'm safe. His name starts with a C. I'm good. It's a free lunch. Right? You guys know that, right? I had whittled down to like 100 pounds. Well, actually not that much, but it sounds good. 100 pounds for the camera. So we go to this restaurant. He's not my type. I'm like, this is the first and the last date, and he's probably thinking the same thing about me. We were not compatible in what we had done before, and who we had dated before, and who we were married to before. Yet during that whole lunch, I started to be attracted to him. And he said, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a spirit medium, and went, where the heck did that come from? Because I had never really said that out loud. I had nobody that I could say that to. And instead of HR, I said spirit medium, and he went, cool, can you pass the ketchup? And when I think I might marry this guy. So as I was telling him the whole situation with the medium and kind of teased him and said, well, you must not be the one. Your name doesn't start with an R. He turned ghost white and said, my whole family calls me Robbie. Does that count? And I married him, Chuck Robinett. So he supported me through this kind of crazy, thing. And to have someone support you when you didn't feel any support from anybody in that was alive was huge for me. And it's huge for anyone who's going through any changes. So karma. We are the master of our own destiny. We are given the choice to live or oppose by the divine law. Choice is very important. We've suffered and died, and in this we reap the gifts and fruits of our labors. That sounds very important, doesn't it? There's no test either, no quiz. So we actually keep our karma from this lifetime into our future, and we keep our karma from past lifetimes. That's scary. So that doesn't mean that if we were a serial killer in a past life, which you guys weren't, that you're going to come forward and just have bad luck. It doesn't work that way. It's much more complicated than that. But there is a way to release your karma. And I keep saying this to people. If you want to email me, my business card's on the table by Robbie over there. I still call him Chuck because that's how he introduced himself. So it's weird being with his family because they're always like, Chuck, who's Chuck? Robbie. But there is a past life vow that you can say, and it's pretty much just severing all vows that you may have made in the past. What a lot of times what we forget is that we are the master of our own destiny. I still believe in a higher power, don't get me wrong. I just don't believe that we are pawns to that higher power. I believe that we have that free choice, that free will. And life is like a play. We're the writer, we're the director, we're the producer, and we're the actor. And so many times we're waiting for somebody to save us when we just have to start doing it ourselves. So cleanse yourself. This is like one of those Pinterest things. Be grateful, act with love, check your motives, watch your attitude, and forgive. If you can do that every day, you're golden. I don't know who can do that every day, so it just sounds good. So what is a soul and what is a spirit, and how does that relate to past lives? So a soul is your intellect and emotion. A soul actually means life. And it's part of your spirit, it's part of your character. The soul, as with the spirit, is the center of your spiritual and emotional experience. I don't get too much into the Bible because I just don't want to do that. I want to keep this fun. The Bible's fun, don't get me wrong. I'm going to have all these haters. The Bible's fun. Tonight's not the night. So in the Bible, whenever the word soul is used, it refers to a person alive or a person that's passed on. As the soul evolves, it takes on different incarnations. So whether you believe in reincarnation or you don't believe in reincarnation, I'm not here to prove either which way. I'm just telling you my story because I didn't believe in reincarnation either. So they say that history repeats itself. Maybe history repeats itself because we repeat ourselves. A lot of times you'll hear these kids that just blurt out this information about things that happened to them in past lives. Sometimes we've had the little kids that just know things that they shouldn't know. And there might be more to that. So the soul has a conscience and an understanding, and it knows right, wrong, good, and evil. A spirit. The spirit will see things in other dimensions. That sounds really kind of new agey, doesn't it? And it brings things back to the soul. So it's like the retrieval. So have anyone ever heard of a soul retrieval? Shamans do it. Don't do it. No offense to shamans. I'm really racking up that. The brain will store the information. So as you go through your day, every day, you pick up subconsciously everything that you're going through. It's like our computers are programs. When we pass on, when your loved ones come and visit you, or you go and see a medium who brings you that visitation with them, they know things that are going on. Half the time they know more than what you know because you're like, I don't remember that. And a year later you're like, hey, I remember that episode. So everything we are experiencing gets programmed into our brain, and we have choice. Each time you decide to reincarnate, because it is a choice, it's not like a cannonball that shoots out, you create a new body, obviously, but you often keep the same personality. The lower self is the part of ourselves we can all identify. We can change gender form, we can change race, social status, ethnicity, but we tend to keep with our same soul groups. Following me so far, I hope? So Dr. Ian Stevenson did this at the University of Virginia, did this whole study on reincarnation, and boy, the taxpayers were not happy. He got a lot of slack for this. But he gave evidence that determined that there's something to maybe look at with regards to this. And it was hypnotic regression, and Dr. Brian Weiss is one of the leading people with regards to that. So it's regression, it's DEJAVUs, those that have the DEJAVUs, it's xenoglossy, which I'll talk about in a second, birthmarks, and the Bible. So for those of you that can't see it, the little boy's talking to his grandpa and says, yeah, well, I didn't believe in reincarnation when I was your age either. No one really laughs at this one. Welcome back to the Center for Reincarnation Studies. Some people believe that if a person or place seems familiar, that it's because you've known them before. Have you ever just met somebody and you never really knew them in this lifetime, but you have that attachment to them? That's called vibrational alignment. And sometimes it is connected because you may have known them from a past life. Now, it doesn't mean that you're automatically supposed to be their best friend. It just means that the puzzle pieces of your life from the past life are sort of clicking into place. Who does that look like? Christopher Reeves, right? That is not Christopher Reeves. That's actually Thomas Green. And he was in the Civil War. He fought in the Civil War. He fought at Gettysburg. He actually was injured in his lower back. That actually is not Robin Williams. That is actually William Barksdale. And William Barksdale and Thomas Green were actually best friends, and they fought together in the Civil War. So in his book, Someone Else's Yesterday, Jeffrey Keane theorized that a person in life can strongly resemble the person he or she was in a previous life. Darn it. John Travolta? This is also, and you'll see a theme here that most of these people are Civil War. And you'll start to see this theme as the generations progress. This they actually found in a Tennessee, in a room that was buried, like in memorabilia. And this guy was trying to sell this picture for $50,000 on eBay. Nicolas Cage and Justin Timberlake. I actually think that this is kind of a fun story. They believe Nicolas Cage is a vampire. I don't know why. I'm not saying that that's the truth. They say that he reincarnates every 73 to 76 years. So we'll have to see what happens when he's between that age, right? Both of these were also in the Civil War. Except let's go to Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis resembles DEJAVU, World War II, General Douglas MacArthur. Actor Hank Azaria resembles philosopher Rudolf Steiner. And look at their eyes, like in all of the different photos. And these aren't like photoshopped. I know that you can do this. You can go to the history books and see this. And Maggie Gyllenhaal looks like historical journalist Rose Wilder Lane, right? Isn't that crazy? Phil Collins, at the age of 5, would constantly tell stories about how he was an Alamo soldier. And as he got older, he started to collect things from that time period. Just within the last couple of years, I saw an article that he started to sell things off because he felt like it was something that he had to detach from. He needed to progress his soul. So DEJAVU, who's had DEJAVU? Most all of us, right? Some scientists will say that it's like our brain skips a beat and we go 15 seconds ahead and then we go back. And there's sometimes where you get that DEJAVU or you've dreamt it and you're like, I will not walk this way. And you just have to because it's just like pulling you. So DEJAVU means already seen. And it's the phenomenon of having that strong sensation of an event or an experience that had happened in the past. Xenoglossia is the sudden ability to speak a language one has never learned. My son, who is now 17 years old, several years ago, our rooms are on opposite sides of the house. We don't have a big house, but we're still on opposite sides of the house. And I woke up to hearing a really weird noise. And I thought maybe he was playing like his Xbox or something. And I thought, that's not like him. He's typically a good kid. So I get up and I go in front of his room and he's singing a Gaelic battle hymn. He doesn't know Gaelic. He doesn't know Irish. He doesn't know Scottish. He barely knows Spanish, which is what he's studying in school. But he's singing it at the top of his lungs. So I open the door, and he's sitting up in bed. His eyes are open, and he's just blasting this battle hymn. And to this day, I wish I would have recorded it on my phone. And I was like, Connor, which he's got an Irish name, so that worked. And he said nothing. He just is singing to his heart's content. Connor, nothing. Connor, yeah, Mom? I said, you're singing? I am? Plop, fell right back to sleep. The next morning, he has no recollection of it. He was out. He said he was so tired. I'm like, because you were singing all night. I'm tired too. A couple weeks ago, I had my event at the Raven in Port Huron. And I had a gentleman that came up to me who said that he not only has guides, and he was somebody within the church. I want to keep it private because I know this is going on TV. He was somebody within the church, and he said to me, he whispered in my ear, and he says, I can write in different languages. I channel people, and they give me all of this information, and I don't know what it means, but I write it down, and I believe it's Greek and Latin and all these different, possibly even, BC language. And he goes, I'm going to cry. You're the only one that I can tell this to. I've just told this to like 100 people. But he said, because I don't know if anyone else would ever believe me. Now, automatic writing and xenoglossy happens more frequently than you'd think. A lot of poets, a lot of songwriters, those in the creative field will do that automatic writing. You sit down and you write something, and it's like you're half asleep and you're not sure where it came from. And even the Beatles said most of their stuff was written that way. Now, it was in their language, but it's still a sort of a form of xenoglossy. It's automatic writing. And it was not the drugs. Birthmarks. So Dr. Stevenson also did this study on birthmarks. And he pioneered the study that determined that you often will have a birthmark that will be connected to how you possibly passed away or had an injury from a past life. So if you were born with, a slice down your back, there could have been that you were stabbed in the back in a past life. My daughter, I always pick on them during these. My daughter was about 2 years old, and we were sitting down on the floor, and we were playing games, and I was about 3 months pregnant, did not know what I was having at the time, and we were sitting there, and she said, remember when Dad saved my brother and me, and you died? Nope, don't remember that. She said, it happened in the fire. You died in the fire. No, honey, I'm here. I'm good. We're good. I'm here. I'm not leaving you. She said, nope. He saved us, and you died in the fire. Now, the interesting thing was I've always been afraid of fire. If you, as a little girl, and even now, but if you bring me into a room with a bunch of candles, I'm constantly watching the candles or the fireplace. So she said this happened in Japan. Oh, she's 2. And I said, no, this did not happen. And she was determined that, yes, it did happen. And she raised her hair up, and she was born with a strawberry birthmark in back of her neck. And she said, see, I was burned there. And I said, no, that's an angel kiss. And she said, no, Mommy, angels don't kiss. I was burned. Very practical and pragmatic. When her father came home, I said, what are you watching on television? And he's like, Blue's Clues. And I'm like, does it have anything to do with Japan? Because she said that that's where she was, and you saved them from this great fire. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And sure enough, I was pregnant with her baby brother. She had a huge passion for the Japanese culture as she grew up. And I never mentioned the story afterwards. It wasn't something I brought up. And when there was that tsunami that happened several years ago, my child was never sick. She never quit school. I mean, she never stopped going to school. Even if she was sick, she went to school. She never called into school. She couldn't get out of bed for several days. It was like she was losing her ancestors. Unfortunately, she went to Wayne State, and the whole xenoglossy didn't come back to her, and she failed Japanese. Don't tell her I told that story. This I kind of gloss off of. The Bible, they believe Elijah came back as John the Baptist, and there's several different verses and information about that. So the choice of souls was in the most cases based on their own experience of a previous life. Knowledge easily acquired is that which the enduring self had in an earlier life, so that it flows back easily. Plato, which means that we're supposed to learn our life lessons from the past life into this life, just as we're supposed to learn our lessons and our past history of this life into our future. Like, don't marry the same deadbeat every single time who's got a different face. Or don't accept a job that you hate and you're still accepting that lateral moves. I simplified that one. That's not Plato, that's Kristy. Soul groups. Now, a lot of times that's the whole thing. Like I'm talking about, marrying somebody that's the same as the previous one, getting divorced and creating those patterns. A lot of times people are like, I really, really want to meet my soulmate. You really, really don't. You want to meet them, but you don't want to marry them. And you don't want to necessarily be with them in that same relationship that you had previously, because it means you're not what? You're not learning your lessons from the past. My husband hates when I tell this because I married my husband from a past life. So sorry to ruin it for you in the book. So soul groups, they say, can be like your sister could be your mother in a past life, and your brother could have been your sister in a past life, or a child, and that they don't go consecutive through that. It's kind of complicated, but interesting. So a soulmate is nothing more than a soul or souls that had known one another. We try to romanticize it so much, right? Oh, I want my soulmate. Not really. Unless you're supposed to complete something that you didn't in a past life. So have you had a past life? Some ways that they say that you've had it is that old familiar feeling, again, much of that deja vu, that you have dreams of houses or experiences or places from a past life as if you actually were there. You probably were. You know history without actually knowing it. I get this with a lot of kids, especially those that are connected to sort of being ADD or ADHD. And they're the sort of disrespectful kids when they're studying the Civil War, or they're studying World War II, and they go to their teachers and say, that's not what really happened there. And they can tell that different story. Another way you know that you've had a past life is you've had a soulmate. This isn't necessarily an intimate. It can be that you've got that best friend that you've known one another forever and ever that stems before this lifetime. I had a man that came to see me several years ago, and he was actually very troubled. He was an engineer for Ford, so what I do doesn't really make sense to him, and that's okay. And he and his wife had gone on a trip. I think it was to Florida. And on their way to Florida, he all of a sudden just pulled the car over. And his wife's like, what are you doing? And he gets out of the car and he starts walking in this field. And she's like, well, maybe he has to go to the bathroom, but that's not like him. He's not like that. And so she starts following him. They walk almost a mile into these woods. He bends down, starts brushing all of the leaves away, and uncovers a tombstone and says, that was me. I was a fighter pilot. My family buried me here. This is my farm. She's freaked out, and it's like he snaps out of it. They walk to the car, and he felt this sense of accomplishment. He was exhausted. But he felt connected again. On their way back from their trip, they tried to find it again. Couldn't find it. So we all have guides, all of us. Whether you want them, whether you don't want them, whether you know they're there, whether you don't know they're there. We have them, and there is a difference between guides and guardians and our loved ones on the other side. I do not believe that we are locked up on the other side and we can't visit our loved ones, which is a good thing. So there are different ways to sort of know if you're confusing yourself with it, because a lot of people say, am I just imagining it? And a couple of the things are, does it resonate with you? The information, have you ever just been driving the car and you got this great info? Or I should pull off here, and then you hear about an accident down the road. Or you feel this nudge to look at the clock and it's 11:11, or it's your birthday, or it's your mom's birthday that had passed, or, there's just these little nudges that are not coincidences, because there's no such thing as coincidences, there's synchronicity. So you want to ask if it's resonating with you. Does it make sense? Is there anything that's validating that can go off of? Because obviously there has to be some of that. You can't just be naive. Well, you can, but it's not good to be naive. Does the advice make sense to you when you're getting these little different nudges? And are you receiving results when you listen? So if you get this, maybe you should pull off over there, and you hear of that accident, that's a validation, that's a nudge that made sense. And do your guides stay consistent each time? So you know how you can kind of hear that voice in your head? You know, if you had lost your mom on the other side, you can hear her voice in your head going, that's probably not a good idea, or maybe you should do this, and everyone's got their own separate voice. Your guides have those voices too. So why was Poe brought to me? I say that he wasn't an exclusive person. It's not just me. When I came and I wrote this book, and I wrote it without telling anybody. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't tell my kids. I wrote the book, and I thought I'm going to have my publisher, and I had already been published. I said, I'm going to have them read it and see what they think. And when I went to them, they said, no, that's just crazy. I like the honesty. It's okay. And I said, well, can you just read it and just let me know what you think about it? And they said, yeah. The next morning, I had a contract on my table. And they said, we love it. It makes sense. And it does make sense. And when you read it, it will make more sense. I'm not going to divulge everything within it. But I had the attempted kidnapping. I was working at the Metaphysical Center that just so happened to be across the street from a police department. When the police were bored, they'd come over and they'd throw cold cases on my desk and say, help me. So moving on from Bobbsey Twins, Nancy Drew to true crime helped me work with the law enforcement on these cold cases and murder cases. And I was actually pretty good. And word got around that I was pretty good at it. And I still, to this day, work with law enforcement on different cases. I would really like to solve the Oakland County killings, but they won't really talk to me so much. A lot of people don't realize that Poe, when you say Edgar Allan Poe, you get a lot of people that know The Raven, and they know the macabre stories, Rue Morgue, Telltale Heart, right? Or you're like, I just read something in middle school or high school, and I don't remember anything else about him. That's most of it, and I'm okay with that response. And what a lot of people don't realize is Poe led a very dark life because he lost so many people. He did not believe in doctors because nobody ever saved the people that he loved. They died. And he was very, very much alone. He was a ladies' man because he would like to seek out those that had money so that he could write. He was a player. And so he had a very tortured soul. He really did. Death to him was new beginnings. He really wanted that death, and that's why he focused it on that death. Now, he had no money. He was broke until he wrote The Raven, and then he started to get some accolades. At that same time that The Raven was going on, he was an armchair detective. And there was a series of crimes that were taking place in his time period that was much like Jack the Ripper, but what was happening was the serial killings were happening, and it was a bunch of young boys that were being found in the water, and they were found dead. They were attributing that to being overly drunk. And what was Poe known for? Being a drunk, right? Most people say he really wasn't. He drank, but he wasn't a drunk. So he really wanted to solve this case because this case was determined upon reward money that was going to be huge. And it was going to really determine on how his future was going to be. And he could pick and choose whatever assignment he wanted as a writer until he died. There's something like 27 different theories of how he might have passed away, from rabies to alcohol poisoning and everything in between. But not one of those have they considered that he was murdered. I won't end the book for you. You have to read it. And don't read the end chapter. So he was trying to solve these series of crimes. And at the time, he was talking to somebody who was an intuitive in a past life whose name was Sarah. And he was not only trying to talk to them to help him solve these crimes, but he had lost so many people. And back then they did seances, much like readings. When I met my husband, my now husband, this sounds like such a dirty, I really need to reword this story, but I'll just tell it to you. You guys can laugh. So he came over to, I was at a small duplex, and I was getting ready to move. So I was only there temporary, and I had my stuff mostly in the basement along with my pet rabbit, whose name was Ginger. And I said, do you want to come down to the basement and see my rabbit? It just sounds really bad, I know. And so that's a really bad pickup line, right? So he's like, okay, thinking maybe there's no rabbit there. And so we go downstairs, and I'm showing him the rabbit, and he's looking around, and he's like, where did you get that picture? And it's a picture of a little girl with a dog that dates back to the middle of the 1800s. And I've always had an affinity for this painter. And he's like, that is so weird. My whole family has this painting. It's passed down generation on my mom's side. So it wasn't long after that I had this dream about my vision with being Sarah, and I got a last name. And I said, my last name was Butler. And I woke up and I'm like, do you know a last name of a butler? Now we had just really started dating. And he said, well, yeah, that's my mom's side of the family. They're all butlers. Again, not coincidental. So in the past life, my name was Sarah Butler. My husband now, he was Edward Butler. And we actually have found our graves, including our kids. He has 2 kids, I have 2 kids. And one of his daughter, who's getting married on Halloween actually, her name is Cora. And there was a Cora Butler. So again, not coincidental. And there actually was a Cora Butler who was in his lineage too. So that was his great grandmother. So it was sort of surreal to see that. So Poe decided that as I'm dating him, he decided, well, you really need to go to Asheville, North Carolina. What's in Asheville? He's like, you'll figure it out. You're going to have a seance at this old B&B. I'm like, which B&B? He's like, you'll figure it out. So my assistant, I said, can you find me a haunted B&B in Asheville, North Carolina? So I gave her like 4 different names. She called me up and said, this is the strangest thing, but there is this B&B that's called the Reynolds Mansion, and the Reynolds Mansion isn't even open yet. And they pretty much said, we knew you were calling, and they invited us to do this haunted weekend with them. Now, if you remember your Poe history, the last name that Poe said was Reynolds. Again, no coincidences. We had a very fun weekend there. We had some interesting things that happened at the seance. And we went to Myrtle Beach sort of as a side, fun vacation. And off of that, I said, we need to go to Poe said we need to go to Charleston. So again, I haven't told my husband any of this. He does not know that it's Edgar Allan Poe that's dragging us across the country to all these different places. He is just like game for it. So I'm like, we have to go to Charleston. He was not happy about it, but I talked him into it, and I said, well, we won't stay at a haunted place, because that's always my thing. Like, even now, our anniversaries, where do you want to go? Gettysburg would be cool. The most haunted place in the United States, of course. So I actually booked a place at a non-haunted location. But as we got into Charleston, he had never been there. I had never been there. He's like, I know this. I know these roads. I know this place. I know that our house is here. And as I'm not telling him anything, it's clicking into place for him too, which was really interesting. And then you'll have to read the rest of the book to find out what happened. Now, these crimes that Poe was trying to solve has continued on through generations. We talked about karma and those that have continued. They continue today. And the publisher asked me to be very cautious with what I put in the book so I wasn't a target. And my son, who is the age of those that were being murdered, is not a target. If you Google the smiley face killer, you'll understand. I had to reword things in the book a little bit more. but they all have everything to do with the crime that had taken place in the past. So that is that whole soul group and the continuation of life and death. So now I have one other kind of fun thing, and I know we got a ton of people, so I don't know how we're going to do this. But if you can find a partner, if you can, stand up and go back to back with them. You don't have to touch if you are oogly joogly with that. And so I'm going to have you just stand up and go back to back. And I want you to remember that goal. If there can be 3 of you too, if you've got an odd. So what I want you to do is when you're back to back, I want you to remember that golden light that came down from the ceiling that we did in that other meditation. I want you to envision that light. Close your eyes. Envision that light around you. And I want both of your lights to converge and to sort of melt together. And as they do that, you get a glimpse into the person that you're in back of's past life. See what they looked like, what their occupation might have been. If they're with a horse, a carriage, a car, if there's nothing. And now I want you, as quick as that, to turn around and share. For those of you that it did not work well, there's a lot of energy in here. So it could be that you're just not, connecting because there's so much kind of crazy energy in here, right? Sometimes it also means that you didn't have a past life. Not everybody is an old soul. Sometimes people are new souls. So those of you that did that, I see a lot of people explaining, and did some of you get some good information? I see a lot. Isn't that weird? It's cool weird though, right? I did this at one of my psychic development classes, and as I was doing this, I ended up having one of my clients there is a physician, and we didn't say anything about doctor, and I didn't call him doctor or anything, and we did this, and he wasn't a real believer in this. He was interested. And so the lady that he went back to back with was a complete stranger. And the lady says, I see you with this long, black coat. It's the 1800s, and you have a stethoscope around your neck, and you were a doctor. And he went, okay, maybe I kind of believe in this. So it was, it is very telling with regards to that, too. So, and I think it's fun. And again, we can learn the lessons. Sometimes if you love to cook, or you hate to cook, it might have an affinity to that past life. Or you have a chicken as a guide, and it could be because you had a pet chicken, before. So there is a rhyme to the reason. Forevermore came out on October 7th, the 165th anniversary of Poe's passing. Even in his passing, he was made fun of, and he was ridiculed. And my job in writing Forevermore was to clear his name. And I hope that I did him good by that. We are in 3rd printing of the book now within the last couple of weeks. So we're really proud of that. The book doesn't just detail, if you don't know anything about Poe, that's okay. The book also details how to find your guide, and also has meditations in it too. So it's got some learning with it. I also have It's a Wonderful Afterlife will be out in August, and it talks about heaven, and it talks about the messages that our loved ones share and how they share it, whether it's through coins or dreams or visits. Messenger Between Worlds tells a lot about my story that you kind of heard tonight along with others. But you all are guided, all of us. I always say that you should never, ever feel like you need to go see a medium. You're your own best psychic. You're your own best medium. You shouldn't have to pay thousands of dollars for a reading. We're in such an instant gratification type of a society that we think we have to get that validation. Trust yourself. If you feel mom or dad or your sister or brother in the car with you, they are. If the light's flashing and you have that knowing that that's that person and it's your son, it is. You don't need me or anybody like me. Just start trusting yourself in that gut instinct. Thanks so much for coming, and happy Halloween.